What's the scariest thing you've ever witnessed on a casual day? I left work for lunch walking to a restaurant just 2 blocks away. As I rounded the corner, a car accident happens right in front of me. A lady walking just 10 feet in front of me is hit and pinned between the car and a building. She was conscious and mad as hell. Despite her legs being obviously broken, she let loose a stream of verbal abuse on the driver about her shoes, her dress, her phone, everything except her injuries. It was surreal. But when I fractured my own ankle 3 places, there's an instant of pain, but then it's gone, and can take hours before you really start feeling it. Shock and a rush of endorphins are amazing. I remember the stories of guys who cut off their own trapped thumb/fingers and managed to drive to the hospital. A wired patient running down a hallway naked, screaming that he was going to kill me before being stopped by a hospital guard. We had a withdrawing 300-pound Samoan guy threatening to rape and murder us all. It took 5 RNs and 3 security guards to get him into hard restraints. Started spitting and everything. He remembered it when he finally got through it all. Came back and apologized. Hopefully he stayed sober after all that. I was in class one day when my professor had a seizure. She tried to stand up, but ended up falling to the ground and violently shaking. And of course I was a helpless idiot and had no idea what to do. Went out to eat at a Chinese restaurant with a couple of friends. One friend has a shellfish allergy, but she tells the staff every time, and we'd been to that restaurant a million times before without issue. That day we had a new server, barely spoke English, and apparently the message didn't get passed along that she had an allergy and absolutely could not have anything that came into contact with shellfish. Her tempura couldn't even be fried in the same oil as any kind of fried shellfish. You can probably see where this is going. She started eating, then suddenly began to panic and told us to call 911 because she was having an allergic reaction. I got on the phone while she took out her EpiPen and shot it directly through her thumb. Thankfully the response time was ridiculously fast, and they were able to administer epinephrine before her throat completely closed up. Expensive hospital bill and sore thumb aside, she ended up being fine. But for a few moments there, when she shot her EpiPen through her thumb and was clearly getting worse, I really believed I might see my best friend suffocate in front of me, and there was nothing I could do. Was walking back to my family's car after my great-grandmother's funeral. Not exactly casual, but it was a quiet sunny afternoon, and she had basically died of old age. We were about 40 yards from our car when we heard the loud snap of wood breaking to our left. To our horror, a large dump truck had just barreled over a small tree and was heading down a hill directly towards our cars with no one behind the wheel. 2 of my younger brothers were already running to our minivan to get the good seats and were close to its path. I still remember the screams of my parents and uncles/aunts as everyone realized what was happening within a few seconds. Amazingly, no one was hurt. My brothers stopped in their tracks and the truck missed our car, but absolutely crushed my grandpa's car right behind it, and multiple gravestones across the road before finally coming to a stop. We would later find out the driver had forgotten to engage the e-brake when parking. One of the scariest, most surreal moments of my life for sure. Junior high school. Was supposed to meet my buddy Nick at the swimming pool. He didn't show, so I walked the 3 blocks to his house to yell at him. His mom let me in, and I walked up to his room and opened the door. Found him hanging from a belt tied to his ceiling fan. Making the long drive home from the lake house and following behind a tractor trailer on the highway in the middle of nowhere way up in the Canadian Rockies. We round a bend, and out of nowhere a small car coming the other way far too fast for the bend loses control and hits the tractor trailer head on at highway speeds. Big cloud of car parts explodes into the air. The small car spins violently into the ditch. Instinctively I jump out and run to the small car, shouting at another motorist to call 911. Get to the small car, and there's basically nothing left of the front. The engine was sitting on the other side of the highway. I look at what's left of the car and can't find the driver. Confused, I look around and see him in the ditch. I run over, check his carotid pulse, but nothing. I step back, and it's only then that I realize that his arm is missing. His leg is missing. His other leg is pointing completely the wrong way at the hip and is bent in a number of horrific angles. They shut the highway down for 8 hours investigating the scene. The image of his mangled body hasn't faded though. Edit. If you're wondering what a tractor trailer is, it's what we call an 18-wheeler here in Canada. Also known as a semi-truck, an HGV, or an articulated lorry. I saw an old man have a seizure as soon as he walked in the restaurant I was in, and his head fell under my little sister's chair. Came upon a car accident and went to help. Upside down car with wheels still spinning. Dude crawls out of backseat with blood everywhere. He looks up at me and his eye is hanging out by the nerve and rolling around his cheek. Got him clear. Professionals came. I left. I was visiting New York City and my friend and I were trying to rent bikes, but they were all gone. This couple was going back to Europe the next day and they really wanted to go on a bike ride, but they only had one bike. I gave them the one I was going to rent, and they were so happy. The excitement on their faces made my day. My friend and I go to another bike rack like 1/4 of the mile away and get 2 bikes. As we were riding down the path we hear sirens and a shoot ton of people are huddled in an area with a garbage truck like 10 feet away. Apparently the brakes on the rented bikes didn't work and this person got hit by a garbage truck. There was a trail of blood like 10 feet long and the person on the ground was seizing very badly. As we got closer, the guy from earlier was hysterical and the person on the ground was his wife. The same couple we made so happy by giving our bikes to them had their lives change forever in an instant. Honestly, the scene of the accident made it very clear she wasn't going to survive. It was really bad. That has fricked with me for a while because that was supposed to be my bike. I was supposed to get the bike with the non-functioning brakes. In what was an act of kindness on my part was the demise of that beautiful couple. What would have happened if I never gave my bike away? Would I have gotten hit by that garbage truck? Back in the 6th grade, I was in English class while construction workers were on the roof repairing it. My English teacher steps out to talk to the principal, so everyone was starting to get loud, as you do. Then the hanging lights fall on us. The way the lights were set up in 3 lines that run across the classroom. They hung off the roof at about a foot with metal poles. The school was built in 1960, and I doubt anyone actually replaces the light holding since the lights start to squeak. Nobody cares. Except for one kid. His spider sense kicks in and bolts out of the room. Once he gets out of the room, the lights start to collapse and everyone runs out. Our teacher looks like she's about to have a heart attack and the principal orders everyone to check for glass shards. No one is hurt, and we all get the day off to play the Wii they have in the band room. All in all, pretty good day. I was stopped at a red light arguing about ice cream when a motorcycle plowed into a left-turning SUV right in front of me, throwing the biker 50 feet. His legs were totally destroyed by it, and he was screaming my leg is broken, but his leg was more than broke. I was driving in Seattle a few weeks ago on a narrow, winding road. 3 guys fly by me on motorcycles. They were trying to be cool, weaving in and out of traffic, and into the oncoming lane at points. It was honestly suicidal. I was behind them thinking these guys are going to frick up hard. Sure enough, one of them gets into the bicycle lane and guns it. Blows a stop sign, and almost gets wrecked by someone turning, but avoids it and loses control of his bike. Slams full speed into a house and goes flying. Dead on impact. Body ended up not far from the road. I've seen people get killed before, but that one messed me up the most for some reason. It was surreal, because I knew it was going to happen. I saw the whole thing unfold step by step, but really couldn't do much. I grew up in a pretty small rural community. Like, no lie, the entire county only has 1 stoplight and 3/4 of the streets in the county seat are one way. It's very much an everyone knows you and your business kind of place. So on the day in question, the high school and middle school kids were already on the bus. I was in middle school, and we were circling around the one-way streets headed to the funnel of our county's only stoplight, so we could eventually get to the elementary school. As we were waiting to inch closer to the light, we pulled up to the end of a small cross street that had the only 3 bars in town just in time for me to look to my left out the window to see one of my classmates dad shoot a man in the face with a double-barrel shotgun from maybe 4 feet away. Guy was standing on the sidewalk against the white wall of a small restaurant across from the bars, and my friend's dad was standing on the curb of the same bit of sidewalk. Blew his head about completely off, and I will never in my life forget that man's skull and brains dripping down that white wall on an otherwise beautiful fall afternoon. After he shot the guy, friend's dad just turned and sat down on the curb with gun next to him, lit a cigarette, and waited for the cops to show up. I was the only person to actually watch him pull the trigger. Everyone else didn't turn until they heard the blast. My bus driver got on the radio and called it in, but couldn't move the bus out of the way because of the stoplight bottleneck and one-way streets. So a bus of about 20 middle and high school students got a front row seat to a mostly headless corpse for almost 15 minutes while we waited for emergency crews to bust through traffic to the scene and get it moving enough that our bus could finally pull away. I was driving behind an open-top Jeep and the dog riding in the back just jumped out. Driver had no idea that it happened, got his attention though, and the dog was safely reunited with his owner. Some crazy hobo coming at me with a knife that I hadn't noticed because I was looking at my phone at the time. Just remembered my stomach being really warm, then my thighs, and the warmth just traveled to the sidewalk, and that's when I realized I was bleeding. When I was in high school, I got a part-time job at a psych hospital in an apprenticeship program for student nurses. I looked older and no one actually asked for my age or academic credentials, which admittedly was weird. I got assigned to an outpatient site visit team. The first month I was there, we went out to see a dude who had not been checking in. He was dead and thoroughly eaten by his hoarded cats. Wife was long gone and collecting his disability checks. Not sure it was scary, but certainly was the grossest thing I've ever seen. My friend and I got lost in downtown KC while on our way to a concert. We had pulled over and were looking at the directions. Across the street was a very high steep hill with a sidewalk. I suddenly see a little girl in a toy car start rolling down the hill toward oncoming traffic. A man is right behind, presumably the father, doesn't notice immediately. In a matter of seconds this little girl is flying down the hill and her father is sprinting after her. My friend and I are holding our breath, horrified at what we are seeing. The road at the base of the hill is bustling with cars. Suddenly, the father launches himself in the air, think Superman flying, and catches the handle of the car. It was absolutely insane and terrifying, but also an incredibly powerful moment. The father gave no thought to his injuries, just dove to save his daughter. I have a couple of stories. The worst one, I was driving to work at my shooty job at the shoe store. Zoned out driving, I noticed out of the corner of my eye and watched a guy lose control of his car out of nowhere. Not sure what happened, but one moment he was just fine. The next, he rolled his car 4 or 5 times off to the right side of the highway, off of the road. I had enough time to get off the road, call 911, and check to see if he was okay. He had fallen out of his car and sustained quote a few injuries and wasn't conscious or breathing and had no pulse that I could feel. I started doing compressions while waiting for EMS to arrive. A few minutes later, they take over and can't get him to start breathing. They take him away and I give a report to the police and head to work. Later that day it dawned on me that I watched someone die and did compressions on a corpse. A bloody, horribly injured, and completely disfigured corpse. The second occasion was when I lived in Mexico City. I went to a religious school down there for a few months to learn Spanish. I'm from the US. It rained so much over the course of an hour that the streets were rivers, and the buildings had a small layer of water on the floors. Linoleum is freaking slippery when wet, I'm sure you know. Everyone is sliding around on the floor, and some dumbass yells, "Do a 360. And a friend of mine, the kind of guy who does anything, no matter how crazy, sprints, slides, and makes it 180 degrees. It looked like someone yanked his feet out from under him, and it happened so fast that his feet were in the air while his face smashed the floor. I watched 4 full teeth shatter out of his head and disappear into the white floor, while a couple more teeth chip and break off small pieces. Blood immediately begins gushing from his nose and mouth. Nearly a 10-foot diameter of the hallway was covered in blood, and it was spreading. I got some paper towels and pushed them up against his face as he struggled to his feet, soaking them almost immediately while someone else got the blood mopped. He ended up with a massively broken nose and 4 missing teeth and 3 or 4 others that were chipped. He took it like a champ. I was downtown eating pizza with my roommate, and outside the restaurant, a man attacked a woman and bit her in the face. He ran off and she ran inside of the restaurant to get help. I could see that he had taken a chunk out of her face, and it was just gruesome. Worked at a boat and jet ski rental business during the summer. Season was winding down, so we only had 2 to 3 rentals a day at this point, so days were pretty quiet and uneventful. Some Korean kids, early 20s, take 3 jet skis out for an hour. Normal shoot, had to constantly tell them to keep the skis away from each other and slow the frick down near shore and docks. I was on my phone during the last 10 minutes of their rental, could hear the jet skis buzzing in the background. All of a sudden I hear a this and no buzzing. I look out and immediately yell at my co-worker to call our boss. I hopped on a spare jet ski and rushed out there. They had hit each other going around top speed and completely ripped one ski in half. I see one guy with almost no teeth and a swelling face, blood freaking everywhere. 2 others in the water next to him. I pull the guy with the face onto my ski and start screaming at my co-worker to call 911. Guy had broken every bone in his face and lost all but 2 teeth. I had blood all over me. The other guy broke his leg in 3 places and had a hole the size of a golf ball through his foot. We got them back to the dock. EMTs arrived and I had to spend the next 3 hours pulling the ruined skis out of the water and cleaning a lot of blood. Driving to work one day. Lady falls asleep at the wheel, misses a turn at over 75 miles per hour. When the car stopped, it was on its side. As I run up, she is pushing on the windshield to get out. She gets out and sets down, blood all over her face and hands. Then she says, "Where's my baby?" I turn white and start looking for the worst thing I'm ever going to see. I find the baby sitting in the her seat like nothing is going on and perfectly fine. I used to do security for an outdoor shopping center. I saw this guy sitting on bench while walking one of my patrols. Next patrol, he was still there. I sat down and chatted with him for probably 20 minutes or so. A couple of hours later he was killed in a hit and run. I witnessed it. I stayed to help PD clear the crowd, answer their questions, etc. This kid's deckhead friends went to his parents' house, told them their only son had been killed, and brought them to the scene. I caught his mom as she passed out. Found out later, kid was supposed to be meeting friends, different ones, for a farewell dinner. He was supposed to ship out to Marine boot camp the next week. Edit, typo correction. On airplane in severe turbulence. Said airplane has TV in the back of the headrests. Has a channel displaying speed, altitude, location. During turbulence, plane fell almost 4k feet in a matter of 20 seconds in bad downdraft. I, the passenger, did indeed piss myself. Sat in a dead traffic jam in the middle of some roadworks, engine off, windows open, just accepting I was there for a while. People had been out of their cars and spread the news we were stuck. I hear some sirens, so naturally I switch on the engine and pull the car in as close to the edge as possible so that these vehicles can get through, thinking it was an ambulance for a crash or something. Next thing I know, about 10 cars back, this car pops out from a gap in the cars. 3 police cars come up the closed lane. He stops for a second and he just floors it right down the middle of all the stopped traffic. Wing mirrors flying everywhere. There was nothing you could do. I just braced myself for him hitting me. Thankfully, because I had moved in, he sailed past me, hit a van, and buggered off down the queue. Thankfully nobody was hurt and there was only minor damage all round, but it took a long time for my heart to relax back to its normal level. Never did find out what was going on, but I found a picture on Facebook of the aftermath. Traffic moved shortly afterwards. The police cars blocking the road went after the guy, opening it again. It's something that actually happened twice in my life. I was working at Subway, making sandwiches. Suddenly I hear this really loud noise. I thought it was our ice machine acting up. So I look up, and this pickup truck came crashing into the dining room. People were screaming. Kids had glass in their eyes. It was insanity for a few hours. Turns out the driver had a seizure and hit the gas pedal. The second time I was working the graveyard shift at IHOP. It was around 2 AM, and I had 3 tables. Again, I hear this really loud noise and the building shakes. My tables were freaking out, saying it was an earthquake. I had a sudden flashback and was like, nope. That's the sound of a car hitting a building. This time, it turns out these kids had stolen a BMW from a local dealership and were running from the police. 2 of the kids took off running, and the other one comes in, bleeding everywhere and asks me not to call the police. Then she ran off. It was crazy night. Probably a little tamer than others. My roommate was a type 1 diabetic, meaning he doesn't produce his own insulin. Well, he also doesn't manage his blood sugar well. One morning his daughter comes banging on my door and says something is wrong with daddy. I go into his room and he's stretched out in his recliner having a seizure. The way his eyes were able to follow my movements is something that's seared into my memory. We called 911. He's still alive. We don't live together anymore because I couldn't stand taking care of him. But I know one day he's gonna lose control while he has his daughter and she's going to watch her dad die. And that scares the shit out of me. Was at an NFL game sitting up in the nosebleeds. It was pouring down rain so most of our section had cleared out, but my buddies and I decided to stick it out because we were broke college kids and knew this was probably the only chance we had to see our team. There were a group of drunk kids behind us, probably high schoolers or freshmen in college, who decided to climb over the seats to get down rather than taking the stairs. One of them slipped and went tumbling down at least 10 to 15 rows, just bouncing off of seats. He landed in the first row right where the railing was. We all thought he was going to go flying over the edge to the bottle bowl. It was the most terrifying 7 seconds of my life. A few years back I was in my car at a red light. Up ahead was a semi-truck with an empty car carrier trailer. It was the first car in line and was pulled a little bit too far forward. A blind man was crossing the street. Following his cane, he stepped inside the empty carrier, in between the semi and the trailer. He was very confused as to where he was, obviously. Then the light turned grey. I was 3 cars back. I immediately put my hazards on. Luckily it was a hot day, so the truck driver had its windows down. The car closest to the semi reacted. She got out of her car, ran towards the semi yelling stop. She then escorted the blind man to the other side of the road. So many things could have gone wrong, but thankfully things went right that day.